The newly freed Israelite slaves faced a threat not from an enemy nation, but from the God living right in the middle of their camp. They are no longer standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. The tabernacle has been built, and the cloud of God's presence has filled it. This creates a massive disparity, a perfectly holy God dwelling in the center of an entirely flawed people. This proximity is an immediate physical danger. In the world of Leviticus, absolute, unshielded purity is lethal to anything corrupt. If sinful people draw near to it without protection, they die. The central challenge for ancient Israel wasn't merely military survival, it was learning how to live right next door to a consuming fire without being destroyed. In the 10th chapter of Leviticus, two newly ordained priests named Nadab and Abihu serve inside this sacred space. They fill their censers, add incense, and bring unauthorized fire before the Lord. By ignoring the established commands, they attempt to invent their own path to the sacred. The response is instant and terrifying. Fire comes out from the presence of the Lord and consumes them completely. Their failure proves that worship near God's presence cannot be shaped by human impulse. It leaves the nation in a state of silence and shock, facing a terrifying question. If God is this dangerous, how can anyone stand before him? The book of Leviticus is the answer to that question. It is not a record of man reaching up to God, but God mercifully dropping a precise survival blueprint down to man. The first layer of protection in this blueprint is the sacrificial system, a heavily regulated, deliberate transfer of human guilt. A worshiper brings an animal to the altar and physically presses his hand onto its head. He accepts this animal as a substitute for himself. Then the blood is brought near the altar. In this ancient context, blood represents the literal currency of life, the price required to pay the cost of proximity for a sinful people. To handle this bloody exchange, God establishes the priesthood. These men serve as required mediators, guarding the boundary between the holy and the common. During their consecration, Moses places the blood of a ram on the priest's right ear, the right thumb, and right big toe. The priest's entire life is marked for God, what he hears, the work he does, and where he walks. This architecture of blood teaches Israel that access to God is never casual. It demands complete life surrender and strict obedience to his boundaries. This tension reaches its peak in chapter 16, on the Day of Atonement, the most solemn, high-stakes day in the Israelite calendar. To solve this crisis, a mechanism requires two goats. First, one is sacrificed. Its blood is carried into the sanctuary to cleanse the holy space. The high priest then confesses the nation's iniquities over the second goat. It carries the guilt away into the wilderness. True atonement requires both of these distinct actions. Blood cleanses the sacred space, and removal carries the guilt away. Only then can God remain in the camp. God's holiness reaches past the tabernacle and into the camp itself, reshaping the way the community lives and works together. This system dictates daily survival. When farmers harvest their fields, they are commanded not to reap all the way to the edges, leaving a portion to feed the poor and the foreigner. This extends straight into the marketplace. Israel is required to use honest weights and measures to ensure the vulnerable are never exploited in business. The most radical social law in this blueprint arrives in chapter 25, the year of Jubilee. Every 50th year, a trumpet sounds across the land and triggers a national reset. All debts are wiped out, indentured servants are freed, and sold land reverts back to its original family inheritance. Biblical holiness is more than avoiding impurity. It is a social structure that mimics God's mercy, ensuring that the Israelites never become oppressors in their own land. Israel now possesses a functioning counterculture. Their calendar, their diets, and their economy all testify to God's presence among them. Even with the rituals established, a critical flaw remains. The blood of bulls and goats provides only a temporary covering, meaning the priests must repeat the same sacrifices year after year. This cycle builds a spiritual vocabulary for Israel, defining terms like substitution and atonement. But because it never ends, the system points beyond itself, anticipating a finality that the blood of animals can't achieve. Jesus Christ steps directly into this Levitical blueprint. He perfectly embodies the flawless high priest, the unblemished sacrifice on the altar, and the scapegoat sent outside the camp carrying human sin. He permanently solves the problem of proximity. By absorbing the lethal consequence of corruption, Jesus tears the veil and ends the cycle of blood forever. Physical animal sacrifices have ceased, but God's perfect holiness has not changed. True worship cannot be casual admiration from a distance. It still requires the surrender of the whole life before the Lord. We have to recognize our own inherent flaws and our desperate need for this ancient architecture of mercy in our modern lives. Stop attempting to invent a path to the divine. Step into God's provision by surrendering your life to Jesus Christ.